Yeah, 100%. There's no way I would have made this with any other camera, I don't think, because it's so quick. And like I say, you can literally whip it out your pocket and then start filming.
What's up? I'm R.J.Baculo, filmmaker, comic book creator, and mental health ambassador, here to share with you an inspiring new series interviewing different mobile filmmakers from around the globe. In 2020, the whole world was shut down by a global pandemic. The way we lived our lives would drastically change, with social isolation being the norm. A lot of industries were affected, particularly in the entertainment sector. But that didn't stop our next guest. As an actor, Rob found the pandemic a real challenge creatively, with nothing to do but hope the acting industry would open up sooner rather than later. After discovering the iPhone shot feature-length film Tangerine, Rob set out about documenting his journey, learning everything he could about smartphone filmmaking via his YouTube channel, Smartphone Filmmaker. Rob now teaches people of all ages at schools and organizations how to make a film professionally on a smartphone. His latest short film, Anxiety Train, shows exactly what can be achieved on a high level, even with limited resources. All the way from the United Kingdom, it is my pleasure and joy to introduce Rob Leach, aka the Smartphone Filmmaker. How you doing? Hello there in London.
Hey, I'm all good. How you doing?
Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your mobile filmmaking journey. Like, how did you become a mobile filmmaker?
Well, it's kind of random with the whole pandemic that kicks off, was it like 2 years ago now, I think it was. It feels like ages ago now, it kind of
Going on to
was.
three, I think.
Yeah, it must be. And then I was kind of like sat in my flat because basically, obviously, all work was off for a period. And I work as an usher at a theatre outside of this. So the theatre just shut down, all like the arts industry shut down completely. And so I was kind of like sat twiddling my thumbs on the sofa playing PS4, which wasn't particularly productive. So I wanted to like do more acting. I thought, well, I need to kind of start creating myself because there's no point waiting around for things to happen. And we never know when the industry is going to come back and all that kind of stuff. So basically, I went on YouTube. I was looking at, is it possible to make a film on a phone? Because I kept thinking, maybe it is, maybe it's not. And I'd done a film where it was shot in 4K, and the director, he kept saying to me, it's in 4K, it's gonna be great, it's in 4K. And then I realized on my iPhone 6S I had at the time, it shoots in 4K. And I was like, well, that's weird because my phone shoots in 4K. And this was like, everyone was raving about 4K. So, well, maybe I can make a film. Found Tangerine. I was like, oh, not only can this be done, it's already been done. And hearing his story about, I think it was at the, I want to say Sundance Film Festival, where, or was it the Rain Dance, where at the end of it, it said on the screen, shot on iPhone, he said there was like an audible gasp from everyone because nobody could have guessed that it was on a phone, because he'd used it in such a way that suited the story. And then from there, I wanted to document my learning process of smartphone filmmaking. So from there, I made a YouTube channel. I was thinking this could be a disaster because if it ends up being terrible, it's not going to last for long. But I set myself like a target of doing like one video a week. So for the first year of this channel, I did one video a week to kind of like build the subscribers, build the base of people watching and learn as quick as I could. And because obviously being in a pandemic, nothing was going on. It gave me all the time in the world to kind of put videos together and stuff. So yeah, and now I'm teaching smartphone filmmaking, got the new film Anxiety Train. It's out on my YouTube channel, Smartphone Filmmaker. And yeah, hopefully getting people to start making films themselves because, you know, there's nothing to stop us now.
Cool. That's amazing. Like personally for you, why do you prefer or recommend the smartphone as a filmmaking tool?
I think it's for the main thing for me, which is I've kind of learned as time's gone on, is it's just a really fun way of making films because I thought about saving up for like a DSLR mirrorless camera, but I thought I've already got a phone, and when I eventually upgrade, I won't have to buy another camera anyway if I want to carry on using the phone. So it was A, like it's really fun. B, it saves money because then you can spend the money you would have spent on a camera on like lenses, filters, a gimbal if you want one, that kind of stuff, the handheld rigs. And it just felt a lot more affordable. So you don't have to like basically feel like you can't make a film because you haven't got the money. So now you can start making whatever you want, whenever you want. And it just felt like a very accessible way to start making films, and especially to learn the basics of filmmaking as well, because it doesn't matter what camera you have,
Right.
to learn cinematography, to learn framing, composition. And it's really good to learn how to get a sense of depth in an image because there's such small sensors on a phone. You have to do a few little tricks and techniques to develop a sense of depth for the audience as well in the image. So it's a perfect like starting ground for learning filmmaking, I think. And yeah, it's so accessible to me.
I'd heard from like other filmmakers like even like Spielberg or like those old school filmmakers back in their time, they used to use like Super 8 cameras or home video cameras. And I guess
Yeah.
for our generation, this is it. Like using a smartphone, like what we have, and practicing our craft. This might not be the end all of be all that of our journey, but this is the steps that we can take to get there to become like a filmmaker. And you mentioned your recent film, Anxiety Train. Like, how did that come about? Like, I mean, can you share to us your mobile filmmaking workflow? How you came about that film from start to finish? I know you have a series on a YouTube channel, but like a nice little like summed up version of that. Like, how did that come about?
So basically, because I come from like an acting background and I've written stuff before, I'm always like story first, because it doesn't really matter how good the film looks. If the story is just non-existent, then I'll just switch off watching something for like a minute or two, because I'm like, well, there's no reason to me to watch, so I don't care where this goes. So I started off with the story, and I was thinking like, how can I make this something a bit more personal, a bit more of a drama type short film? Because I made comedies, I've made like quirky films, which are really fun ways to learn filmmaking. And then I thought, okay, I want to make something that's going to make a bit of a difference. And also I want to take the first sort of 8 films that I've made so far that are, varying degrees of how good they are, and then put that all into this latest one and tell a story that's quite personal. So I was looking at my own experiences with social anxiety, things like that, where I've not gone to big events of friends because I'd be going on my own, and all the anxiety that comes with that. And friends' experiences as well of anxiety. Because when I started talking to people about this film before it got made, so many people were like, oh yeah, I suffer with that. And I was like, what? And like, because it's not like a life-threatening condition as such. Like, people don't really talk about it. I think people presume, wow, it's not that big a deal, I just won't talk about it. But it is, and it's to varying degrees, like anything. So I started writing about my own experiences, putting that story together, and that took me about probably, I would say, 5, maybe 6 months to write. Even though it's only 12 pages, I was going through it over and over and over and over again, thinking, right, okay, this doesn't quite make sense with how it ends at the moment, so how can I tweak that to make it make sense? Would he go this way when he could have gone that way? Just making sure, because like when I've watched short films before, obviously not everyone's, but you see somewhere you're like, that doesn't quite ring true. So whenever I had that kind of moment looking through the script, I might make a little tweak and make sure it does. And then I was using Final Draft for that. So because I teach, I managed to get like quite a hefty discount on Final Draft. Nice. Otherwise, I never would have been able to afford it. Because I've been using Microsoft Word up until now, which it gets you by, but it doesn't lay out the script properly. So you have to spend ages trying to like format it. And even then it doesn't come out properly. So using that to write, then I started looking at how I was going to put the film together with what accessories I was going to use and filmmaking equipment. And I knew I had to make it very, very quick, the filming, the shots, because basically we were up against the time the whole time. I think with the first scene where she's getting ready in the bedroom, that's the only scene where it felt like we had quite a relaxed time. So I was like, oh, this feels really good. And then that evening we went to central London to film. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be really against the time. And you've got to work with what's there, how many people are there. The lighting slightly changes sometimes when you go back to the location. Before even filming, I did about 4 or 5 like half days of location scouting as well, so that we weren't just like winging it on a prayer kind of thing, looking for places to film. So everywhere we went, that was planned down to a T of where we would shoot and where the shots would be. So that saved a lot of time. And it's all handheld as well, no gimbal, so that saved time. And a lot of the filming preparation and the process was about not attracting attention whilst we were filming as well.
Right.
So having things like the moment case, which I then had the telephoto lens, which I have here. That was a big part of like just being very discreet about the whole thing. So literally my whole rig was the phone case on the phone, the lens on the case, amazing, and then a Rode wireless go. And that was pretty much it the whole way through. So I was able just to pull it out of my coat pocket, be like, right, okay, get the lens quickly. And right, so we're shooting here. You're going to walk to here. You're going to have that moment of like, oh my God, there's the bar, or I'm nearly at the bar. And then from that shot, we're going to go leg it over there, do this bit. So it was really like pelt it around everywhere, and making sure that everything was just very, very low key. So it didn't attract attention for like security either. That's a big thing. Because there's someone, I won't say who, but there was someone who's just want to do some behind the scenes for me. And we did some like location scouting, but it just wouldn't have worked for the filming because people probably would have stopped us if there was too much going on. yeah, that took about 5 half days, I would say, to film the whole film. So that was spread out over about 2 weeks, because the first night we didn't actually film everything I wanted to film, so I had to go back again at some point. Luckily, the actress who I know, Lizzie, who plays Izzy, she was like, oh yeah, sure, I don't mind coming back for an evening. So I was like, oh, thank God. Otherwise we would have been missing about 2 scenes. But yeah, 'cause you think, oh, 12 pages, someone walking around for most of the film and making a journey, can't take that long. But actually, you know, things do take a lot longer than they expect, and just got to go with the flow.
Would you owe it to that mobile filmmaking workflow, like that mobility and that, able to like be inconspicuous and then like be able to kind of like shoot on the fly almost? Like that must have been a key factor to this production.
Yeah, 100%. There's no way I would have made this with any other camera, I don't think, because it's so quick. And like I say, you can literally whip it out your pocket and then start filming. And when you're against the time and you're low budget as well, it's not like I had a crew of people with me. Like every single thing I did by myself. Like literally the writing, the casting, the location scouting, I was going around on my own 4 or 5 times. Obviously the filming, the directing, the lighting, everything you could think about is what I did myself. Yeah. So phone was like really key to be able to save time and be able to still get a good image, and make sure, along with Filmic Pro as well, that I was using, to get something that looks professional. And like you say, with the workflow, making sure it was quick, accessible, and with the time restraints we had most of the time, it made such a big difference. And I really don't think there's any way I would have made this film without a phone.
Amazing. I mean, when I watched the film, I was like really amazed about it, that it had this cinematic or filmic quality to it. And I don't mean like that word's thrown around a lot, like, on YouTube and everything, like cinematic this, slow motion, and whatever, like the kind of look it is and stuff. But like your film, I find it cinematic because of the performances, because of the way it was, what was happening in front of the camera, not because of the camera. And I think a lot of like mobile filmmakers or filmmakers on YouTube, they too much, they focus on like getting that beautiful image, but then what's in front, the performance or the story or whatever it may be, like that's the actual thing that makes it cinema or makes it a film. And you probably have an advantage because of your acting background. Would you think that played a factor too?
Yeah, definitely. Exactly like you say, sometimes people get like a really great looking image, but then what's in front of the camera, it might be like a friend or something like that. And you can get a good performance out of a friend if you put a role to them that's very similar to them. But I always, yeah, because I come from an acting background, I'm an actor, I'm really, really, really keen to make sure that the acting's always spot on, because I don't think, I'd rather wait another 6 months trying to find the right person to film rather than be like, especially now I know a lot more about filmmaking, before actually saying action on the first take. Because if you've got someone who looks the right part, but just isn't, a particularly the right actor for the role that you're casting, it's just not going to work, and the film's just going to feel a bit off. So with Lizzie, who played Izzy, I've only seen her in one advert. I haven't seen her in anything else, but my girlfriend knows her, and sometimes you just get a sense with someone that they'll be a good actor. So I was like, yeah, I'm 99% sure that this is going to be really good. So I asked her, and she's like, oh yeah, I'd love to, yeah, it'd be great. So knowing that someone that's like really instinctive like she is, I knew that that's what I needed for this role. It's quite a challenging role as well, because whilst there's a lot going on, it's also fairly subtle. Like she's not going around going like, oh my God, like everywhere. Right. Which is what I've seen in some anxiety, like short films and stuff, where it's like really telling the audience how the person's feeling. Like what you said about it's what's in front of the camera. I wanted the audience to feel it rather than be told it. So her performance was really, really key to that. And then Lily, who played a best friend, who was really good as well, making sure that two people would fit together as best friends and be believable. And I think they were, especially in that park scene as well, where they're kind of, spoiler alert, kind of making up from what happened the night before. And Andrew, who I know as well from work, he's a really good actor, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind playing like a business kind of apprentice kind of snob, basically. He's like, yeah, I can do that.
There is a saying that like directing is 50% casting, like casting the right actor, it's already half the job done, they say.
Yeah, exactly. It's so important, because you can have everything set out, you can do all the prep in the world, but if the casting's off, it's kind of gonna F the whole thing up, basically. So you need to make sure that you've got all of that down. Because I think when people are getting into smartphone filmmaking, it's very easy to do. You forget that it needs to be good in front of the camera as well as what you're doing behind it. Right. So to match that up together, then like you say, you got something that's kind of like cinematic and it comes together storyline wise. Because yeah, YouTube does throw cinematic around a lot. I said it a few times on my channel. I always try and say professional instead, just to not say it. But sometimes you kind of
SEO purposes. That's what
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned some challenges making the film, but what are some other challenges you faced as a mobile filmmaker in general?
Just being low budget, I think, because in the nature of filming on your phone, generally you're going to be someone who's filming low budget and doing everything yourself. The actual phone, I think the biggest challenge would probably be maybe the depth of field, because you can get some now. Like I'm doing this interview on my iPhone 12, shot the film on this iPhone 12 as well, Anxiety Train, and you can get some depth of field now, which is really good. But with the again, the telephoto lens, that was a real big part of getting a depth of field. But before I had that, it was really tricky. So you had to look at things like lighting and putting something really close to the lens to get that depth of field. It's something that phones still really struggle with, and it's going to get better with every phone that comes out. But whether it gets to a point of being like, oh, you really can't tell any differences, I don't know. But it's more than good enough for what we do and to make something look professional. But depth of field, low light filmmaking actually is a real struggle, which was weird because this short film, 3/4 of it was shot in no light or low light. So I was going around London making the most of like advertising, kind of big lit up kind of areas like Piccadilly Circus in London that's lit up everywhere, finding little spotlights as well. So there's one shot which is one of my favorites where she's kind of sat down after, I think it's after she's had the argument with her friend, and there's just one stair rail light that's on the opposite side to the camera square, and it just kind of like silhouettes her to the camera. And I think trying to figure out how to use those kind of lighting situations to get the most out of your filming is definitely one of the biggest challenges, because you can look at something at fairly low light and to your eyes it looks really good, professional, and it looks great on camera, and then you get your phone out, set up the frames per second with a shutter speed, and all of a sudden you can't really see anything. You're like, what? That's not what I was seeing. You know, I can't, well, how do I fix that? So then you've got to look at getting closer to the light source or this kind of stuff. But I would say low light filming, probably more so than depth of field, is the biggest challenge.
Definitely, yeah, with mobile devices and stuff, those tiny sensors that we have, but they're getting bigger slowly and slowly. What would you say is your favorite piece of gear or tool or even app in making films with a smartphone?
I would probably, I mean, it's got to be Filmic Pro, really, actually, because that's kind of what allowed me to then start making films. And I think it's, at first, it's like really daunting. Oh my God, there's so much on the screen. I don't know where to start. I never made a film before the pandemic or anything like that. So I was learning about shutter speed, frames per second, what the hell that means, why the hell do you need to match it, what happens to the image when you don't match it, all that kind of stuff. So the app Filmic Pro is definitely the one thing that I love using the most. And I just think you have to have a professional film app, whatever you do making films, because you can try and do it just on your normal app on your phone, but you're not going to get the right frames per second. You're not going to have the right control over white balance, all that kind of stuff, exposure. So the app, more than anything, is the most important thing. And then other than that, the telephoto lens definitely is a really fun lens to use. And when you look at the difference between without it and with it, it's like night and day. And even when it's quite subtle at times, if I had not used that lens on the film the whole way through, it would have looked quite flat at points. Mm-hmm. Whereas with this, especially with the duologue scenes where there's over the shoulder shots and stuff like that, it really adds a much more professional look to the film.
And it gives that natural depth of field, unlike that fake cinematic software depth of field. It's more organic.
Yeah, exactly. With that whole cinematic mode that's come out now, like I was thinking, oh, that looks really cool. And then I was watching some YouTube videos on it, and then when you look closer, like there's all that blurredness around the edges and stuff. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to get around that, because on the advert, everyone was bald or had like really, I know, right? So you're like, oh wow, this looks cool. And then someone mentioned it in the comments, so I was like, oh yeah, that's true. And then when I saw people like frizzier hair or like longer hair, oh man, this is going to take a while to, if it ever gets like spot on. But yeah, the lens, like you say, gives you a proper depth of field.
For you, what do you think the state of mobile or smartphone filmmaking is today? Where are we at, do you think?
I think we're still at the kind of Fight Club stage of it, where it's like an underground kind of thing where you don't talk about it. I think it's quite like a bit of a cult following almost, which I really like. It feels a bit underground. So people like in the news, I'm seeing loads of people using it for like in England, like BBC News and stuff like that. Loads of people using mobiles for journalism. It's so quick to set up and shoot and all that kind of stuff. And people don't really care about depth of field if they're watching the news. So it works out great for them. But yeah, I just think it's quite a awesome place to be right now. And with so many feature films being made at the moment too, there's loads and loads and loads of feature films constantly being made on phones now. I'm always seeing trailers for new feature films. I thought we were on the cusp of it being like exploding at one point, but I think I'm quite happy for it to kind of teeter along, getting bigger and bigger like that. And then all of a sudden people will be like, oh my God, everyone's making films on their phone. Whereas people like us have been doing it for like years. We're like, well, yeah, we've been telling you for ages, it's the best way to do it. Like if you haven't got much money and if it's a fun way to make a film. But I think, yeah, it's definitely at the kind of the cult following stage, which I quite like. I think it's really cool.
Well, following up on that, like, where do you think it's going? Like, what's the future of mobile filmmaking?
I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing more films on Netflix that are shot with a phone, with the likes of High Flying Birds, that was done by Steven Soderbergh. I watched that, and whilst like storyline wise, I was a bit like, I could feel like I'm getting a bit lost as to why this matters so much. But I guess maybe that was more my concentration than anything. But it was shot so well and so creatively, and I think the more big names get on board with phones, the more it's going to become almost the norm. That's quite a way off. I think that's like years away, but that's definitely where it's heading. And I think maybe more films in cinemas as well would be really cool. Yeah. So obviously like Tangerine has some cinema release. Yeah, it's only going to get bigger because like phones are only going to get better with filmmaking. And eventually you're going to see directors and DOPs who are going to be like, oh, this would really suit how we film actually. So it's not like a secondary camera. It's actually one that could be really good main camera for what we're doing. But yeah, I think it's really exciting to see where it's going to go. And people at work, like I said, I usher at a theatre, and those people started like subscribing to my channel, watching my videos. I'm like, oh, so now they know it's possible. They're watching it and learning how to do things. And they've come up to me and said, oh yeah, I want to make it like a film at some point. Like, you can make it on the phone. It's like, yeah, there's so much you can do with it. It's going to get big, I think. Nice. Don't know when, but it is.
It's like you're leading a quiet revolution there.
Yeah, come on, everyone.
Last question for you, Rob. What advice can you give to an aspiring mobile filmmaker that, you know, wants to get started in this, and they're just like you maybe at the start, and like, you know, trying out like Filmic Pro, whatever it is, and like getting lost with all the options, and like, what advice can you give to someone starting out?
I would say be patient with it because there's a lot to learn, and also make sure if you're making films, narrative films, put the story first before you're filmmaking, so then that will inform how you film it. So if you write the story, make sure it's as good as it can be. Then you think, oh, okay, so that's going to suit this side of filming or that side of filming, rather than thinking, okay, I want to do something really edgy. So then I'm going to write the film around that. And I think one of the things as well is to write to your budget. Don't try and like go crazy with it. Don't think, oh, I'm going to do like, I don't know, like a war film with like 100 extras and stuff, which is never going to happen unless you've got a real budget. Think about what's available to you. And then, yeah, write towards that so you can make the best of what you have, because I think that's the epitome of anxiety training. Short films, I kind of made the best of what I had. I had my flat. I didn't want to use certain rooms because it just wouldn't have fit the story. So I used the bedroom, lit that in a way where you'd see like one half of it. So it looked quite full and kind of characterful. And making the most of like also locations near you. So the bookshop, that was initially going to be shot at quite a big library near me. But then I had to go through all this bloody palaver of like going through the film. I don't know what it was called, but it's basically like the local film company that gives you permission to do things. You have to fill these forms and you have to pay like, I think it was only going to be £30 for me, but normally you pay like £100 a day, I think, to shoot. And then they didn't get back to me for ages, and they just claimed the whole thing. So I had to quickly like look at what's closer to me, and found this bookshop was actually more perfect for the character.
Yeah, I thought it was even more perfect.
Yeah, it worked out so much better. It's like a happy accident when something goes wrong. You're like, oh, actually, that's worked out for the best. And just go with the flow. So yeah, make the most of what's around you as well, and watch YouTube channels like yours, like mine, like Simon Horrocks' Mobile Motion channel, Cassius's Go Filmic YouTube channel, places like that. Because YouTube's an amazing place to learn. That's how I learned everything, was from YouTube. So it's like a free film school in a way. So just make sure you make the most of all the free resources available to you, and yeah, just be patient with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob, for your time and like talking to us, to our audience. And yeah, for those like you mentioned, you can find Rob Leach on his YouTube channel, Smartphone Filmmaker. Lots of tutorials, especially how to use Filmic Pro and all the different techniques of filmmaking, especially using a smartphone. So thank you again, Rob. Good luck in your next projects, and looking forward to more films.